So we're talking about the 13 principles of faith. And, the idea of principles are kind of things that you have to believe. It's Maimonides in his commentary, Mishnah, I brought these books here because I wanted to show you guys the original, where it actually is brought down, where these 13 principles come from. Now, when Maimonides wrote this commentary in the Mishnah, first things, it was the first complete commentary on the Mishnah. No one had ever done that. The Mishnah was already printed 900 years before Maimonides was born. Right? Maimonides was born 1135. He was born. The Mishnah was already almost 1,000 years old, and no one had written a complete commentary on all 63 books. Now, Maimonides, as a teenager, he was 18 or 19 years old. He started writing a commentary, and he had finished it by the time he was 24. So by the time, our kids are 24, Maimonides had accomplished something that no one had ever accomplished in 1,000 years prior. And
it's interesting he spoke Spanish.
Well, he grew up in Spain. He lived in Spain until he was 15.
That's probably why.
He moved to Fez in Morocco at the age of 15 because the Almohads, the radical Muslims, came, and they basically said, if you convert to Muslim, fine, or else you have 5 minutes to leave, basically.
Okay, thanks.
So him and his family left, and they ended up living for 9 years in a cave in the mountains in the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. Mm-hmm. And there he wrote this massive commentary. At the age of 24, he moved to Cairo, and he published it. So basically you have this commentary on all of Mishnah, 63 books of Mishnah, written by this young scholar by the name of Rabbi Moshe, the son of Maimonides.
This is his interpretation of the...
Well, he writes specifically on his interpretation because he links his tradition back to Moses. Which is something that kind of ended at that period where the claim that he studied from his teacher, who studied from his teacher, who went all the way back to Moses, that kind of ended at that period. But he writes that I study everything I know, I studied from my teacher, who got it from his teacher, all the way back to Moses.
Okay, but what is a commentary?
Well, commentary is just explaining. The Mishnah is basically a book of Jewish law. It's 63 books spanning everything that you need to know about Jewish law. And Jewish philosophy and Jewish, not so much philosophy, more law, but some philosophy creeps in there.
Yeah.
But it's very terse, it's very succinct, it's very brief, and it's just basically the foundation of Jewish law. It's just the basics, kind of the framework.
And he knew all of that.
Oh, Maimonides was a scholar beyond anything we can even imagine.
Wow.
So in his book, there's this one chapter, the very last chapter of the book of Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is a book of basically a jurisprudence, right? How justice works, kind of the judicial perspectives, how they interrogate witnesses, how they comprise the judicial branches of the court systems, how they execute Jewish forms of execution, for what it's given, like all those related laws. And the last chapter is somewhat of an outlier because it talks about
total departure.
Huh?
It's a total departure.
What do you mean, the last chapter?
If it's the principles.
Right. So the last chapter talks about this world to come, this idea of this
afterlife.
Of this afterlife, exactly. And Maimonides says, before we get started, this is something. But in his commentary, you see, the commentary is very. This is kind of a look at what the commentary looks like. He brings a Mishnah and it has a few lines to explain. That's what it looks like. Mm-hmm. He incorporates a lot of the Talmud, etc. But it's basically on the entire book, you have a few pages.
Okay.
And then, over here, as an introduction to this chapter, because it's on a philosophical issue that's somewhat cloudy, Maimonides says, I'm going to give you clarity. And first he starts off by saying there's 5 different interpretations he collects. It's very organized. Maimonides, the one thing about Maimonides is that he's super organized. Everything is chapters, and everything's broken down to books, into sections, into chapters, and subsections, and subparagraphs. Everything's organized. Super organized. And he says to you there's 5 prevailing opinions. And he lists them one after another as to what the afterlife means. And he has a whole essay, a treatise. It's very long, actually. It's fascinating.
They have that in English?
Yeah, well, they have a good show. Look at this. Here, it starts over here. Just goes on and on and on and on and on. And kind of just gives you a framework of what, like the Jewish perspective, of what punishment, afterlife, Messiah, heaven and hell, all these interesting esoteric topics he delves into, explains to you what it is. And then at the end, he has what he calls the 13 principles of faith. That will be this. These. So this is the first, this is the second, this is the third. This is where it comes from. Now think about it. You have a scholar who's in his teens, who writes a book, and in the book he says that there's 13 elements of faith that are so crucial, they're so fundamental, that they're considered principles, and they're a baseline, and everyone has to believe them, and they're different than every other bits of faith. They're the groundwork, the foundation of our religion. This was tremendously controversial, and he had his detractors, that he has, as he had in many of his other writings, like the Guide to the Perplexed was publicly burned by Jewish fanatics. Well, Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed was one of the premier works of philosophy that in medieval times. But he wrote that, which is basically a Jewish
What was the name?
Guide to the Perplexed.
Guide to the Perplexed.
That was Maimonides' basically Jewish slant on Greek philosophy. That's why it's not so much studied today, because Greek philosophy is kind of it's not so popular anymore.
No.
But he basically presented Judaism and the Jewish worldview through the lens of the Greek philosophical perspective. So those were also very controversial. But you have this delineation of the principles of faith that Maimonides writes, and people went crazy. And in fact, there were books written as rebuttals of his 13 principles. Now, it's interesting to note that if you analyze the 13 principles, you'll find you guys did the first 5. All the first 5 are basically theology, right? God. How do we define God? Is it one part? Is it multiple parts? Is there a body? Right? Is the limitations? God of limitations. Basically, it's understanding what it means to be God. The next 4 are about prophecy. So today we're going to talk about prophecy. So we'll have today the idea of prophecy. We'll have the superiority of Moses' prophecy. We have the idea of the Torah, which is basically delivered via prophecy. And we have that the Torah is the same Torah. This Torah we have today is the same Torah that Moses has. So those are the 4 principles of prophecy. And the last 4 are reward and punishment. So the idea of Messiah is one of the idea of the world to come, etc.
I think we did Principle 6.
We did 6?
I have it written down.
Last week we did. Was that just last
I
week?
wasn't here last week, but the week
So that must have been the week before.
we had all the words of the prophets are true. That was Principle 6.
Well, okay, so we could do 7.
But
That's
I don't
fine.
mean we can't talk about it.
Right.
Now, there was this one book written by a contemporary, what's called Sefer Ikrim, the Book of the Principles. And he spends half of the book basically rebutting Maimonides, he says that Maimonides says there's 13 principles. He says, no, there are only 3 principles. What are the 3 principles? Believe in God, believe in prophecy, believe in reward and punishment.
Like God, prophecy, reward, and punishment. Okay.
Now, if you actually analyze Maimonides, he's saying those same 3 principles, but he's breaking it down, because it's very important. If you say you walk across the street to the church, well, I don't advise this, but I'm saying theoretically, if we were to take a little class tour, we go to the parking lot and we say, "Hey, do you believe in God?" Yes. We go around. Everyone will say yes. Everyone. You come to synagogue. Well, I don't know. They'll all say we believe in God, and then we say, "Do you believe that Jesus had some sort of relationship with God, or is the So you might get different answers about that question. But Christians ascribe divine qualities to a man, to Jesus.
The false prophet.
Well, false prophet or false God or whatever. But either way, they may indeed believe that there is some sort of power that empowers everything else, that is the root of all existence and all life, but they'll go astray in kind of the breakdown of what that means. That it has no body, cannot take manifestation in a physical form, has no parts, right? Is not limited. Those things, they'll go astray. So therefore, what Maimonides says that there are 5 elements of what we say when we believe in God. That's very, very important. Similarly, what we're talking about today, prophecy, the idea of God communicating to people, well, there's multiple elements of that, and each one of those elements is crucial to have our religion. Because if you don't believe in our God, if you don't believe in our Torah, and you don't believe that our actions have consequences, which is the idea of reward and punishment, right? Our actions matter, right? Whether we live or die makes an impact, right? If you, a good parent, it matters to them what their child does. If for us to have a relationship with God, it has to matter whether we act in a good way or a bad way. If it doesn't matter, then our actions are meaningless, and therefore our religion is meaningless. So that's why you actually Maimonides and the book of Principles, Sefer Itim, actually agree. And the first question we're always going to have to ask whenever we talk on a principle is that why is that a principle? Why is it important? Well, we're going to learn today that the idea of the prophecy of Moses, that is one of the principles. One of the principles is to believe in that Moses was a prophet, or was the prophet, and his prophecy superseded that of any of his peers that came before him, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or that came after him, like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Samuel. Right? The superiority of Moses' prophecy. What's the matter?
Throw in a Deborah. Give me something.
Oh, Deborah, for sure. Throw in a Deborah.
Rachel, Rebecca, Leah, just pick any one of them.
Sarah.
Sarah.
The Talmud says that the prophecy of Sarah superseded that of Abraham.
It does?
That's what it says in the Talmud.
Oh, Abraham. I was thinking Moses. Okay, Sarah, Abraham. Yeah, I can take that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Interestingly, the Torah also tells us that we have Gentiles that were prophets as well. Right? We have Bilam. Right? Remember the Jews are leaving Egypt, or they're in the wilderness. They had just left, and a fellow by the name of Bilam, or Balaam, I might pronounce it in English, is employed by Balak, the king of Midian, to get this prophet to curse the Jews. Remember that?
I've never heard it.
Yeah,
Yes. It's the book of Numbers.
It's in the Haggadah, isn't it?
Maybe we mentioned it.
Yeah, I think we did. Otherwise I can't figure out why it would ring a bell.
The book of Numbers. Well, maybe you read
maybe.
it.
Oh, it's yeah. Hello, Torah, weekly Torah. Thank you.
That's why it might ring
Yeah,
a bell.
that's why it rings a bell.
Okay,
That's
so
exactly where it is.
so what we're going to try to do is understand basically what I want to give you guys is maybe a roadmap how we could achieve prophecy, or what are the qualifications of a prophet, because we have many, clear instructions. It's not like there's anything that you need to. There's nothing that you cannot understand about the qualifications.
It is about coming in a dream there were like 5 things. We covered some of this last week. That's why that is sounding familiar. Also,
I don't know. I was covered last week.
You can.
I wasn't here last time. So,
On what? Oh, he can read it.
Yeah, re-education. It was. Come out.
What you're asking me, it's like I don't know.
No. I was looking up into my brain area, seeing if I could come up with the other things. I know that
That's
a false
okay.
prophet will die.
will be executed. Someone who.
Is this all in Principle 6, or this is?
Well, we're doing Principle 6, so we'll just do quickly do 6, and then we'll do 7. Now, prophets. Jewish people had prophets till who? Who was the last prophet? Anyone knows who the last prophet was?
We do know.
Maybe you know.
Only because
Now, we know that Judaism is right now a non-profit organization. We know that. We don't have any prophets anymore.
Exactly. We're always in deficit mode. Exactly.
We're a 501c3.
We will not get locked in. And
but can we lock
I
us
have
out?
I have the code. No, I have the code, and I talked to the president, and he's going to call me back and tell me how to make sure. Because I'm not going to.
I've got an unrelated question real
What's
quick.
your unrelated question?
That only took.
Why don't Israelis believe in the death penalty?
Well, that's really.
Well,
Are you talking about punishment?
what's actually interesting because even in Jewish law, now they just passed a law this week, a very controversial law, which is assigning Israel as a Jewish country. Anyone saw that in the news?
Yes.
And one of the elements of that law was that the justice system in Israel would take inspiration from the Jewish law. But even Jewish law, when Jewish law is in its full effect, and the Jews have sovereignty of Israel, and there's a temple, and there's everything, and there's a Jewish king, right? The only time we actually have the death penalty is when the Sanhedrin, right, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people, is in session, and they're on Temple Mount. Moses, in the Book of Numbers, back to the Book of Numbers, established a Supreme Court called the Sanhedrin, 71 justices, that they existed without any breaks for about 1,500 years. There were times where they had actually left Israel, and they went to Yavne, they went to other places up north. But so long as the Sanhedrin was in session and it was located on Temple Mount with the temple, then they actually meted out capital punishment. But once the Sanhedrin was not in session, or they were disbanded, or they had left Temple Mount and they were in session elsewhere, they could not actually. That's already a law. That's already in the Torah. That's when they have the rights to kind of to mete out capital punishment. Now, what's interesting about that is that the Talmud declares that 40 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, the Sanhedrin left Jerusalem and went to Yavne. Yavne was a city in northern Israel, in the Galilee. Right? And then they went to Yavne, they ended up at Tzipori. The Talmud gives us kind of in Tractate Rosh Hashanah gives us the travels of this body of justices, of scholars. If the Jewish Supreme Court had left their post in Jerusalem 40 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, when was the Second Temple destroyed?
70. When's that? 70?
The year 70, that's correct. So then they would have left the year, quick mathematics,
100 years before?
40 years before, so the year 30.
Okay.
They left 40 years before the year 30. That means that the Jews would not have engaged in any form of execution, not only in Jerusalem, but anywhere. Anywhere the Jewish courts exist, they would not have done that, because the right or the capability of any Jewish court to mete out capital punishment was only when the Sanhedrin was in session in the temple. And therefore, the question of whether or not we executed Jesus, interestingly, is somewhat related to this question, because the Jews could not, by Jewish law, have executed him past the year 30 unless the Sanhedrin was in session in Jerusalem. Now, there is a theory. I'm not going to argue about this. I know this is a very it's a controversial topic. A lot of people have like kind of their perspective, but no one really knows. But there is a theory already brought down in Jewish literature. Now, Jewish literature could go both ways. There's some that seems to indicate that we did execute him. There are those that say that we didn't. The New Testament itself says that we didn't. It's not so clear, but there is a theory already dating back almost 1,000 years that says that the Sanhedrin, while they left Jerusalem 40 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, they actually went back periodically when there was a need to execute someone. And we have a statement in Jewish literature that says that actually it references said execution. So I don't know. Either way. So that's about that. So today, in modern day Israel justice system, they don't have it, because I guess it's probably they adopted basically English common law, and there was a issuing of capital punishment already 50, 70 years ago in other places, not in the United States. And therefore, they have only to date executed one individual, and who might that be?
Eichmann?
That's right, Eichmann in 1962. So that was the only person that was executed, because they changed the law that says that Nazis could be executed. But besides for that, they don't do that. Will they reestablish it? Who knows?
Well, I was thinking of all the terrorists that they have in prison.
Yeah.
Instead of letting them go.
What they actually do now is they just shoot them before they capture them. Oh, there was a gunfight, and they just shoot them. That's simplify that.
Is that final now, that law that says that Israel is a Jewish state?
I believe they passed it. Yes, I believe they passed it. And I think it's a very good thing. There's no reason why the singular Jewish state should have any doubt as to its nature.
Who passed this law?
Oh, the Israeli government.
Knesset.
And and they say this is a Jewish state. This is what it's all about. So Zionism is all about, to have a Jewish state. There's 75 Muslim states and 150 Christian states. How come we can't have one single Jewish state? We can't. It was a Jewish state, but Arabic was, for example, one of the things that they did. They delisted Arabic as a national language. Yeah. Why would you have Arabic as a national language? It's a Jewish state. Hebrew is the Hebrew's language. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Seems legitimate.
Here we have English, but everybody speaks Spanish.
That's right. Well, I don't think we have official listed languages. If you want to form in Vietnamese, you'll get it. We should. Well, we should. Okay, let's get the argument done. Yes.
On your television station, we should. Not on all television stations.
Either way, let's turn back to prophecy. So a prophet.
Because the last prophet is bugging me.
Yes.
Go ahead and spill the beans. I forgot.
So we have
The last prophet?
we have the prophets were the leaders of the people for about 900 years. And we'll notice if we talk more about Jewish history, we'll see that there was a major change that enveloped the Jewish people at the beginning of the Second Temple, Second Commonwealth era. Individuals by the name of Ezra, Nehemiah, Zechariah, Malachi, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. These are the names of the latter prophecies. The last one that we have is Malachi.
Yeah, that's what they call them on the radio.
Yes, Malachi in Hebrew. We could speak in Hebrew. We could call them by the Hebrew names, right? Okay. So that's that. Now, when prophecy ended, we see that a lot of challenges that the Jewish people had not hitherto experienced, they actually had to endure. Like before that, you never had wholesale rejection of traditional Jewish perspectives. Right after the end of prophecy, you meet the Sadducees and the Baitusim, which is a sister group. We know a lot about the Sadducees because Josephus writes about the Sadducees. But that was a group of people that rejected certain elements of the oral Torah. So they took everything in the Torah literally. So if the Torah says there shouldn't be a fire in your house or in your communities on Shabbat, they had no lights, they had no hot food. Everything was, because they took the Torah literally. So when the Torah says wear tefillin between your eyes, it doesn't mean that it should be aligned in the middle of your head. Rather, they put tefillin like that. That was a problem that the Jewish people hadn't had because they had a direct divine link through a prophet, and there was unquestioned authority. Once that divine link was severed, it opened up the door for sectarianism, for schisms, for illegitimate kings like we had in the Second Temple era. We have kings that were not from the Davidic line, like the Hasmoneans. Those were not. There were Kohanim. They couldn't have been from the tribe of Judah via King David if they were Kohanim, right? Because then they came from the tribe of Levi. So that caused a lot of chaos once you lose that link to prophecy.
So we're good. Okay, thank you so much for calling
now,
that. Okay, all right, bye-bye.
What are the qualifications to be a prophet? So,
Lisa Estes.
okay, so we might have said that.
Oh, we don't know how to do that?
That's what we're waiting to hear.
Right, okay.
So if Lisa calls, maybe.
So, what are the qualifications to be a prophet? Number one, this is straight out of Maimonides. You have to be a great scholar. What does that mean? Not only you have to read the entire Torah, you have to know it by heart. You have to know all the laws of the Mishnah. You have to know all the Talmud. You have to know it so well that you're a scholar on the scale that is unprecedented for us in these days.
Is that related to a principle?
I'm sorry?
Is that part of a principle?
No, Maimonides brings that down as the qualifications.
I missed it. I'm sorry.
A scholar. You have to be a great scholar.
You have to know everything.
You have to be mighty, and this is a direct quote from Maimonides I just translated, mighty in his conquest of his character. Someone has to be in complete control of their character. No impulses. Their desires are totally in check. Right? They're have to be physically healthy. This is I found to be very interesting. Maimonides says he writes it like kind of just slips it in. He doesn't spend too much time in it, but he says that he has to be someone who's healthy. Someone who's not healthy, who has any physical ailments, they cannot be. I don't know why. It's very interesting. I have to research that a little further. And I think this is the key to them all. He has to be able to isolate his focus and his mind to just spiritual matters. He cannot have any other forces or influences on his perspective, on his consciousness. Constantly striving to learn more and rejecting anything that's not related to God, to Torah, to spirituality. Wow. So someone has to basically, it's for us is unimaginable. Right? Someone has total isolation in their mind and their focus. Now, what happens when someone has prophecy? So, like you said, it's at night.
Yes.
It's through some sort of imagery, right? We see, like just last week's Parsha, before Parsha, we saw, what do we see?
The ladder?
Jacob's ladder, right? The ladder is a prophecy. For us, if we saw a ladder, right, because it's not in the form of prophecy, we don't have to try to interpret what it means. Jacob, as a prophet, he was endowed with the tools of prophecy, which is not only getting the vision, but also interpreting it. Mm-hmm. The Talmud declares, no two prophets prophesies with the same style. Ein shnei neviim misnavim b'signon echad. You cannot have, everyone has a different style. Why is that? Why does everyone have a different style in the prophecy? Because if you get a certain image, right, there is some sort of filter that has to go through, and that is the interpretation. Mm-hmm. So if you have your perspective on life, and I have my perspective on life, and all four prophets, right, we're not prophets, but if we were, we have our different personalities. there is some sort of filter that it has to go through, and therefore every prophet has their own style, right? Because they have their own personality. There's always a filter. Jeremiah sees a bloated pot. Book of Jeremiah. Right? He talks about this bloated pot. Ezekiel, you open the chapter 1 of Ezekiel, and you see what's called the Ma'aseh Merkava.
Is Ezekiel who saw the writing on the wall?
I think that was
Ezra?
Was that Isaiah?
No, go back. It's not important.
Ezekiel, in the chapter 1 of Ezekiel, if you guys want to blow your minds, open up the book of Ezekiel, get the English translation, and read chapter 1. Because he describes in vivid detail what he's seen. Right? And it's striking. Half the words...
He's the bones?
Well, he's the bones, but that's chapter 38 of Ezekiel. This is chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 1. And Ezekiel gives this tremendous description, very vivid, spine-tingling description of what he saw. But that's what it is. It's a vision with interpretation, and we trust our prophets to have the understanding and the insight to be able to interpret them correctly and to understand what the message is. Now, what's the content? What's the content of a prophecy? Right? What is it talking about?
What's going to happen to us?
So it could be either very macro, like tell the Jewish people to go on a war of conquest, or tell the Jewish people to fortify this city, build this wall, go on this, right? Do this, do that. Right? It could be something very big. It could be something pertaining to him as well, expansion of his mind. Right? God wants to give him a certain understanding of deep spiritual matters for him personally. And it could also be things that are not so, not so earth-shattering. Like we know the prophet Samuel, he was the one who coronated the first Jewish king. Who the first Jewish king? Who might that be?
First Jewish what?
King.
Oh, king.
David?
No. No. That's second and third. Who's the first? Drum roll, please.
It's not Saul.
It is Saul.
I thought Saul came. I thought it was Saul after David.
No, it is Saul. Saul was the first king of Israel.
Can I get another historical clarification?
Yes.
Did Elijah come before
Elijah's
Ezekiel?
after. Elijah's before Ezekiel.
In history,
Elijah is
it's
before. Yeah, I think Elijah's
Did Ezekiel have
Yeah,
one of his prophecies? One of his
Elijah's
visions was
before.
Elijah going up in the chariot?
Elijah,
He had to
yes,
come
I
after.
believe
Okay.
Elijah came before. Yes. Maybe 300 years. They weren't so far away from each other. Now, Saul gets coronated by Samuel, the prophet. How does ancient coronation happen? He takes a thing of oil and pours it over his head. He gets anointed. That's how prophets were. That's how kings were anointed. Right? That's where the term, by the way, Messiah comes from. The word Mashiach comes from anointed one. Right? Just like the term Christ comes from the Greek word Christos, which means anointed one. Because in ancient Jewish practice was that when a king became king, or when a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, became the high priest, they would take a bucket of oil, special oil, and they would pour it over their head and would kind of drip all over them, and that would be like the coronation process. So Saul, the great Saul, was a mighty warrior and a tremendous scholar, shoulders and head above the people. What we would call the consummate leader.
And he was anointed by Samuel, but he's not Samuel's son.
That's correct. He was anointed by Samuel. Right. Samuel was the last of the judges. Remember, the period goes from Moses dies, Joshua is the next leader of the Jewish people, and we have 393 years of what we call the period of judges, where we meet people like Deborah, right? We meet people like Gideon and Samson, right? 16 judges over the period of about 400 years. The last of them being Samuel, and he was the one who anoints the first king. That kind of opens up a new era in Jewish leadership. We have the king, you have Saul, you have 40 years of David, 40 years of Solomon, and then you have the split where Yerovam becomes the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, and Rechavam becomes the king of the southern kingdom of Judah.
Rechavot.
That's why it's kind of like, you're like, oh, they have to make it so difficult. One's named Yeravam and one's named Rechavam. Gosh, they don't make it easy. So how did Saul, what was the interaction that caused Saul to be coronated? So the book of Samuel says Saul was looking for his donkey, And what do you do when you look for your donkey? You're missing your iPhone. What do? You go to the prophet. So he goes to Saul. The prophet Samuel says, "Where's my donkey?" And he says to him, "Oh, your donkey is here. And by the way, you're the king of Israel." Right? Maimonides takes this as an example that the prophets not only fulfilled a spiritual leadership role, but also very practical. If you wanted to know what to do in life, right? You have a dilemma. You have a quandary, right? You have something that you're vacillating one way or the other. You go to the prophet, and even in things that we would look as not being so materially important, like where's my donkey? It's lost. You go to the prophet. They fill that role as well. So the content of the prophecy could be one of those three things: either for themselves individually, expand their mind; for someone else; or for the people, kind of vision and direction, and for leadership of the people. Now, just like there are varying levels of scholars, there's varying level of prophets. Right? The prophecy of Abraham or Joshua, right, is different than the prophecy of Ezekiel or Isaiah, right. Everyone had their own, just like it's a certain level of your growth in your spirituality. So you become a scholar, and you can become a better scholar, a greater scholar, become a more a greater prophet, have more insight, more understanding. Now, what's very important, I think this is perhaps the most important thing of principle number 6, is that we don't believe in a spiritual prophecy lottery. Like a lot of people, or at least in the Gentile world, they have a perspective of what prophecy means. And if Joseph Smith wakes up one day in the 1820s or 30s and it says, "Oh, I'm a prophet, and the angel told me this, and he gave me the golden tablets, and he gave me the book in Reformed Egyptian, I translated this Book of Mormon, here's what you got to do," right? If he came to us and said that, right, he'd say, "Listen, Joseph Smith, you may be a nice guy, charismatic, with a big beard and lots of wives, but you're no prophet.
What makes you a prophet?
What makes you a prophet? You're not any more remarkable." And you have like an illiterate merchant named Muhammad, and he comes and he has the claim of prophecy. Well, he's unremarkable. Right? It's not just something that is just given as a lottery. That someone, wake up in the morning, God spoke to me. It doesn't work like that. It's another stage of someone's growth. If you're not at that point of growth, it's not going to happen to you. You don't have to worry that maybe you'll get prophecy. You won't. All of you, myself included.
You mean
we're not there.
They didn't qualify, actually.
They weren't even good candidates. Okay. Because prophecy is a certain level of someone's growth. And therefore, if they're not at that point, they won't get it. It's just it's almost organic. It's almost natural, right? It's not just random. There's no randomness. It's a certain stage of someone's growth. And Maimonides, he points it out. He says, this is how you do it. Become a scholar of the highest regard, right? Become a person of piety and character of the highest regard. Complete control of your desires. Isolate your mind. And then he says, delve into what's called Pardes, which is the deepest parts of the Torah and God. And then you'll probably have a vision because you're there, you're ready. It's normal. It's not like something that you will earn it. Right now, we're not capable of that level of insight, and we're not going to have those kind of leaders, unfortunately. But when prophecy was in effect, that's how it worked. So. It's not random. There's no such a thing as random, or there's no lottery. It's no just it doesn't work like that. Now, prophecy, because that's prophecy. So why is it such a important principle? Why is our religion dependent, contingent, reliant upon the idea of prophecy? Right? Maimonides is telling us this is a crucial, fundamental, right, essential, pivotal element of our worldview. There cannot be Judaism without prophecy. Why not?
I don't know.
Well, what do you think?
Communication from God.
Okay.
Right.
Think about it. It's actually pretty simple.
It's giving me some serious discomfort because you have to accept that it's communication with God without elevating the man to a godlike stature.
Well, for sure. And who is the most denigrated man? Who is the villain of the Torah?
Haman.
Well, Haman's on the Torah. The 5 books of Torah, the Pentateuch, as we say in German. Who is the most vilified and castigated person in the Torah?
It's somebody who tried to undermine Moses, right?
Well, who is castigated more often than anyone else? That would be none other than Moses. It's that the Torah always points out his flaws many, many, many times. Which seems ironic when the Torah tells us that he was also the greatest man that ever lived and had the greatest level of prophecy, and he gave us the Torah, and he was able to negotiate with angels. He was someone incredible. No one was like him. No one will ever be like him. I think perhaps the message is like this. The Jewish people always understood this. No matter how great a man is, they are yet but a man. Right. Moses is but and Moses lived and he died and he's dead, and we don't ascribe divine qualities to any man. And the Torah is telling us, yes, even Moses, greatest man that ever lived, by a mile, still the Torah points out his flaws because no man's perfect.
So when we have a prophet who has a vision which evolves into a prophecy, it's a moment in their life, and there may be 100 moments, and there may be 3.
That's right.
Because at that moment they're at their purest and their most advanced in terms of spirituality and
okay. So there's a few limitations.
Because when you read this list, and then you say Moses is terribly flawed, he doesn't match the list.
Well, okay. Well, I didn't say Moses is terribly flawed. Moses had some flaws. Not flawed like the rest of us, right. But the Torah magnifies it. Okay. Moses was less flawed than anyone, but the Torah specifically magnifies his flaws because to make sure that we don't make the mistake and say, oh, the Jewish people thought Moses was God, or they just believed him because they were just terrified of him. They just rebelled him because they knew they knew that he was a man, and the Torah is telling us this by magnifying the flaws. Not to say that he was more flawed or was as flawed, but his flaws are.
He was not perfect. He was man.
That's right. That's right.
Why are there no more prophets?
So there's a few answers to that question. The answer that I like to say is because prophecy is, on one hand, an individual idea, on the other hand, it's a communal idea. If we had a prophet, our entire nation would look differently. Right? We would have direction, we would have vision, we would have an insight, we'd have a direct divine connection. Right? So not only do we have to have the individual who has to be meritorious enough to reach that, we also have to have the community collectively be a community worthy of having a prophet amongst them.
Yeah, but in years past that we're talking about, obviously the community was there for the prophet.
That's right. It seems like that prophecy could be perhaps compared to changing a light bulb that's 15 feet in the air. This is an example someone else gave, not my example. Right? You have a light bulb that's 15 feet in the air. No matter how tall you are, you can be the tallest, you can be Shaq. Hakeem Olajuwon, you can't reach it unless you're standing on a table or something like that. Prophecy is a collaboration, basically, of the great individual and God, obviously, but God's not changing. And the community that's worthy of having that level. So when there's a community, so there's people like the Gonaville. Maimonides is a great example. Maimonides, remarkable character, saved the Jewish people in more ways than one. Right, single-handedly saved the Jewish community of Yemen. Right, organized and codified all of Jewish law to make it relatable and understandable to the masses. Right? Did so much on so many different fronts. Was someone that was not capable of prophecy. Perhaps I would argue if he lived 1,500 years earlier, he probably would have been a prophet. Individually, he was there. The community, the collective Jewish community, wasn't ready or prepared or primed to have that prophecy.
So when Moses broke the tablets, it's because he observed, or God saw, a community that was not worthy, given what was done on the ground.
That's a good example.
Okay, and then the next time, they straightened up their act a bit and got their commandments.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
That's also good.
Now,
so we were, again, the prophets preceded. They existed during the period of the Second Temple.
At the beginning of the first temple, say maybe the first 50 years of the Second Temple era. That's when they started petering out then. Which is why
we became a splintered community.
Well, we became a splintered community way before that,
okay.
With the split of the northern and southern tribes of southern kingdoms of Israel. But if you notice, if you've ever heard the name or this body of people by the name of Men of the Great Assembly, you ever heard that term? Men of the Great Assembly, the Great Assembly.
I associate it with the book that sort of seeks to unpeel Catholicism.
No. Way before Catholicism.
No.
So the term Knesset. Everyone knows the term Knesset?
Knesset.
The Israeli parliament. The Israeli parliament has how many members? Anyone knows? 120 members. this was modeled after what's called the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, men of the great assembly. What Knesset means? Assembly.
Knesset.
People of the Knesset Hagadola, the great assembly.
Okay.
Now, this was an assembly which is a temporary expansion of the Sanhedrin at the beginning of the Second Commonwealth, at the year 350 before the Common Era, which was 120 scholars that were established to basically transition the people from a world where they had prophets to a world where prophecy would not be a factor anymore of the people.
Because some prophet told us that was coming?
Well, we have great visionaries like Ezra. Ezra convened this body, and they canonized the Torah, the Bible. So the Jewish Bible, the Jewish canon, is a corpus of 24 books. Right? 24 books in the Jewish Bible. Is that right?
And we're adding Torah, Tanakh, and Ketuvim.
No, Tanakh. All Tanakh. Tanakh is Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. Who decided what goes in and what goes out? That body. They formalized prayer. They did a lot of things, basically, to kind of transition the people from being a for-profit Judaism to a non-profit Judaism. And
knowing and intentional, not organic, or some combination.
I'm sorry?
And that was a knowing and intentional transition?
It was imminent. They could tell that the scholars, that the prophets weren't at the same level. Just like we said, there's levels of prophecy. They could tell that they were basically at the bottom of the level. They knew it was going extinct.
Okay.
So that's why they had to prepare for that, because now you're going to face a new reality where there could be discord and there could be internal infighting, and we don't have that way to stamp our foot down and say, we have a prophet, let's go to him and let him mediate. So they had to basically prepare for that kind of major threat to the Jewish people. That's why the Talmud says that the Men of the Great Assembly, they restored Judaism, because Judaism was at risk of disappearing. And they kind of created rules and a framework and a structure for Judaism that could flourish without prophecy. But that's when we point to the end of prophecy. Okay? And that's why, to answer your question, that's why today we cannot have any prophecies. Now, like you said, a prophecy happens at night. It's in a vision. Maimonides describes the prophet shakes violently. They lose all their physical energy, right? Because it's basically an isolation of their intellect or their higher powers with God. Right? Higher powers, not higher powers by meaning their intelligence, their soul, not their body. So their body gets weakened. Right? These guys are shaking violently, and their physical strength is sapped. And lastly, this is also very important, another limitation of the prophets is that they cannot summon the prophecy. So if you're Abraham, or you're Isaac, or you're every other prophet besides for Moses, we'll get to Moses next, you cannot just say, I want prophecy, let me go talk to God. You have to be ready, you're primed, you're isolating your mind to just God and just spirituality and just Torah, and then you wait. If God decides to appear to you, then yes. So you can say 3 times, 2 times, 1 time, 100 times, 1,000 times. Either way, you're at God decides how many times it's going to appear to you, when and where, etc. Another very important thing: if a prophet comes and tells us that one word or one statement or one mitzvah of the Torah is no longer relevant, no longer true, they contradict the prophecy of Moses. That is a sign that they're a false prophet. Prophet cannot take any word of the Torah or any statement, teaching, verse of the Torah, mitzvah of the Torah, and repudiate it. If they do, then that's by definition a false prophet. Now, what's interesting, if you remember the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel, right? Remember the story of Elijah? So he's having a battle with the prophets of the idol Baal, and he makes an altar outside of Jerusalem, which is a prohibition. So Maimonides tells us that if a prophet comes and who's a verified prophet, and we'll talk about how we verify a prophet as well. How do we screen a prophet? If you have a verified prophet, how do you vet them? Exactly. If you have a verified prophet, and they come and they tell you that we no longer need to do any other mitzvah, any mitzvah, whatever that may be, that's a false prophet. However, if they say, for today, we're going to do a certain sin, or we're going to reject a certain mitzvah for one day, for a finite amount of time, not for forever, then you listen to them. And the example that it brings is that Elijah, Mount Carmel, he makes an altar out of Jerusalem, which is a prohibition. But he did it to save the people. So the prophet could be instructed that momentarily or temporarily he could suspend a certain mitzvah for a certain need. Mm-hmm. But if he were to say that a certain mitzvah doesn't exist in perpetuity, then that's a false prophet.
So we are in a temporary suspension of animal slaughter and those kind of rituals.
That because we don't have, that's not a prophecy instructed. That's just the reality. We don't have a temple.
That was a ritual, wasn't it?
Well, those are commandments. Those are commandments, but those are commandments only when the temple is in existence. We don't have a temple.
That's clear from the liturgy.
That's clear. Okay. Absolutely. Not the liturgy, literature.
I meant literature. So that's clear. So the commandment was not that for all time you will do this.
Well, it for all time, provided there's a temple.
Okay. Well, okay.
But there hasn't been any other commandment that no one said, oh, we no longer wear tzitzit or tefillin, or we don't keep Shabbos, or we don't have mezuzahs, or right, or we don't study Torah. Keep kosher, exactly. That's a good one. If there was a prophet that would say that, then by definition we know that they're a false prophet. So how do we screen a prophet? Is that a good question?
Yeah.
Someone comes to us and says, hey, I'm a prophet. So first things first, he has to be a good candidate for prophecy. If he's not someone who's renowned in their scholarship, who is someone that has a great character, complete control of their character, that's obviously not someone who is a candidate for a prophet. We don't even listen to them, right? That's probably what we'd call a false prophet. Someone who like that could be liable for execution. But he has to give a certain sign. He has to show proof. I come to the people, I say, hey, I am a prophet of God, and I want you guys to go on a war of conquest with our neighbors. So that's a very weighty decision that a prophet can make if he indeed is a prophet. He or she is indeed a prophet, or a prophetess. Now, how do we know that they're not full of baloney? So yes, they seem like a good candidate. But do we have to have some sort of verification?
Yeah, if they don't limp.
Well, they have to be healthy as well. That's right. So first things, if another prophet vouches for them, then they're good. Like Joshua's a prophet, and Moses says he's a prophet, so we know that Joshua's a prophet. We don't need any other individual verification. But what about if we don't have anyone to vouch for him? So he has to make a prediction. He has to make a prediction for the future, and that prediction has to become true and 100% true. If there's any slight variation between his prediction and what actually happened, that's a false prophet. Because a lot of people who are sorcerers, who are able to forecasters with the stars and whatnot, astrologers, they could indeed forecast somewhat clearly, but they cannot have absolute clarity. Prophets, if it comes from God, it's absolutely clear. If there's any slight deviation in what the prediction was and what actually happened, that's a false prophet. Mm-hmm. The prophet can only be vetted with good promises. If a prophet says, hey, you're going to die tomorrow, and the person lives tomorrow, that does not necessarily prove that he is not a prophet. Why? Because bad predictions are warnings from God. And if someone repents, right, that could be annulled. The decree could be annulled. But good predictions are always come true. So if he predicts a certain, whatever it may be, a certain positive outcome for an individual or a nation or the masses, and that does not come true, then they are not a prophet. That's why we use those things, good predictions, to prove or disprove, to vet, to screen a prophet. And they are inspected and screened and challenged multiple times. And if every time they come true, then they are a verified prophet. So that's that. And that's basically principle number 6. You have prophecies, and prophets are the direction, the vision, the leadership of the people, and they're very vital, very crucial, very important for the continuity of the people, for the unity of the people, for leadership, for inspiration, for direction, for guidance. What about Moses? Principle 7. Moses is the father of all prophets. Moses' prophecy is vastly superior to the prophets of all the ones that came before him or came after him. And there's qualitative difference between the prophecy of Moses and the prophecy of everyone else. The Talmud declares, Kol hanavim nisnavru be'aspaklari she'einam me'ira, and I will translate this in Hebrew. Moshe Rabbeinu nisnavru be'aspaklari me'ira. All the other prophets prophesied without clarity. Moses had clarity. That's one statement in the Talmud. Another statement in the Talmud. Kol hanavim nisnavru be'kol mar Hashem. Moshe nisnav be'zeh hadavar. All the other prophets, the words that they used was, so said God. Moses, the words that he used to prophets was, this is the word of God. The idea being, all the other prophets, they had a vision, they had an image, they interpreted it. Moses had clarity. He had peh al peh, face to face. The Torah says face to face he spoke to God. Does that mean he's face to face? No, it means the way you speak to a friend. Direct communication, clear instructions, verbal instructions, no room for interpretation. Clarity, aspaklaria me'ira, clear, bright clarity. Lucidness. Moses was awake. All the other prophets are sleeping. Moses is awake. Standing, not his health is not impaired whatsoever. Difference number one. Difference number two, direct communication, no imagery. Difference number three, Moses was not frightened. All the other prophets, when they have prophecy, they get bewildered. They get freaked out. They start. Their heart starts palpitating as if they're on acid. Moses standing calmly. Lastly, Moses is able to summon God. Moses walks into the Ol Moed. He speaks to God. Moses was always able to have prophecy. He didn't sit there and wait for prophecy to come upon him.
Yeah, he was the only one.
And he was the only one. Now, why is this so important? So we see, hey, Moses was a better prophet, a more talented prophet, a more skilled prophet, a more capable prophet. Why is that necessary? Why can we not have Judaism without that? Why does the prophecy of Moses have to be so superior for our religion to be valid? The answer is like this. We have a religion, and the religion has rules and laws and ideas and messages, and it's from God. From God. We have a Torah, it's from God. Who gave it to us? Who was the conduit who brought it down? Moses. How many mitzvahs are there in the Torah? Anyone knows?
613.
613. Now, out of the 24 books of the Bible, where are these 613? What's the breakdown of the 613 mitzvahs?
I don't know.
In which of the books?
I know they're repeated in Deuteronomy.
Don't know.
Anyone else? How many mitzvahs are there in the book of Joshua? How many mitzvahs in the book of Samuel? How many mitzvahs in the book of Kings? How many mitzvahs in the book of...
0, 0, 0.
That's correct.
But they're all in the Torah.
That's right. Booyah. That's right. All the mitzvahs that we have... Yes. All the mitzvahs that we have are in the Torah. Prophets don't add, don't subtract. Our religion is based upon the prophecy of Moses. Therefore, when we have a religion, we have mitzvahs, we have an identity, we have an instructions, we have this tremendously detailed way of how to live life as a Jew. All that came from Moses. It came from Moses. Did it go through some sort of intermediary? Did it go through some sort of imagery? It came directly through Moses' instructions. The Talmud says when Moses died, there was a measure of forgettingness amongst the people. Jewish people collectively forgot all the mitzvahs. Now, what that means is that doesn't mean that they necessarily forgot it, but they no longer had this direct link. Right? We open up the first Mishnah.
So it had to be delivered directly.
Right. Moses gave it all to us, and we studied for 40 years under Moses, and then we're on our own. And we've been on our own ever since. We got all the Torah from Moses. Right? Moses gave it all to us. All the prophets that come afterwards are different than Moses. They no longer have that direct, they have a direct link, but it's not direct like face-to-face. It's not they can get it whenever they want. Right? Therefore, the Torah had to come through Moses, and it had to be delivered without any room for any ambiguity. You know, if I have a vision, you have a vision, a third person has a vision, we all have our own style. Every prophet has their own style. Why? Because it has some sort of filter. Moses, there was no style. There was no stylist at it. It was just transferring, transmitting, transcribing what God said. You know, Moses wrote the Torah. The words of the Torah, all 5,845 verses in the Torah, 304,805 letters in the Torah. Those were all written by Moses. But it was dictated to him by God. God says, write Vayomer, he writes Vayomer. Write Hashem, he writes Hashem. El Moshe Lemor, right? Bereshis, Bar Elokim. It was by Moses, but did Moses have any editorial influence or any other sway? No. That is on the written Torah. That's on the entire corpus of the Torah entirely. And therefore, it's a very important thing in my mind. You got to believe that, because otherwise, you're leaving room for our religion to contain ambiguity. Our religion to contain some sort of, individual interpretation or elements that were part of the style of that prophet.
I really wonder why God hasn't chosen another prophet. I mean, he chose Moses to give us the Torah, and after that, he didn't choose anybody.
Well, what do you mean?
All those other people were chosen; they just weren't direct links.
Well, no, there were direct links, but it wasn't with the same clarity. We already had the Torah.
I know, but
We've got it.
Yeah, we got it, exactly.
Yeah,
why not keep impacting us?
because we're not.
Because
worthy?
no, but I think it's a legitimate question. I think
I'm
the real answer is because God wants us to do it. Means God could have just given us everything without us. God wants us to earn it. That's the point of all life. God could have just given us whatever. Why do we need to struggle our way through it? Because that's what God wants.
But he gave it to Moses to help us struggle through it.
Well, he gave it to Moses, but Moses, like I said, there was no stopping point where Moses held it. He was just transferring it.
So now we need rabbis like you and all the others.
Well, don't point to me. Is that necessary, Howard?
You're a prophet. I'm just saying that.
Okay. Bring it on. Yeah, rabbis like me. Okay.
But that is what came next,
God,
right?
no, too much honor. Pile it on. Too much.
But that is what happened, right? When the prophets faded out, then we went to that's when the rabbinic era started.
Well, I'm saying, you say rabbinic era. Was it? First of all, it's not so.
Rabbis forever.
Yeah, but we had there were scholars then as well. It's just a scholar is a lower level. A prophet's a higher level of a scholar than a scholar is. More of a rabbi than a rabbi.
But the Torah was everything we needed forever.
It still is, and we're still studying the same Torah. We haven't had to make any editorial changes, and you know what?
We didn't need it.
And you know what? We found in 1947 the greatest archaeological discovery of all time in Qumran in southern Israel, when you found Torahs that are identical to the Torahs that we have, and you find tefillins that are identical. We don't need to change. We don't need to adapt. We don't need to modify.
We got it
because we got it from God, and we got it when unadulterated, and therefore it's immutable. It doesn't need to be changed. It doesn't need to update it. We don't have to have social changes. Oh, it's no longer socially acceptable to worry about the poor, or visit the saint, right? Exactly. We don't need to update it. Exactly. Now, I want to say another important point. This is, I think, going to bring it home. Every religion starts with a prophet. Every religion, the foundation of the religion is a revelation. It could be Joseph Smith in upstate New York, in the mountains. Right. It could be Muhammad. It could be Paul on the way to Damascus, or it could be the experience at Sinai. Every religion starts the same way. That's clear. There is a major difference between the way our religion was founded as collectively as a nation, and B, the prophet that engineered this religion. Moses, when Moses came and told the people, I'm a prophet, did he bring a sign? Did he predict anything? How do we know that Moses is a prophet? Remember, we said, how do we screen a prophet? We ask him for predictions, predict the future, right? We do it several times. The way Moses was verified was different than the way every other prophet was verified. Why? Moses was at Mount Sinai. And who else was at Mount Sinai?
Everybody.
The entire nation. How many people? 603,500 adult males between the ages 20. 603,500 adult males between the ages 20 and 60.
The women were in the back of the tent.
No. Everyone was there, and we could assume that there was a comparable, probably more females, because men die in things called war and bungee jumping. So there's probably more females.
You need to write a book, War and Bungee Jumping.
That's why men die.
Whatever. I just think it sounds like a good title.
You assume that there were some elderly people and some youngsters. There are estimates anywhere between 1.5 million, 3 million people. I think it was probably, I would say 1.5 million to 2 million. That's a fair estimate. And the Midrash says remarkable things. Is even children in the mother's utero were able to experience that, even though they were there. It says something fantastic. It says that the mom's uteros became like glass, and they're able to see and point, whatever. Does that mean literally? Probably not. It means that it was an experience experienced by everyone. And what did they experience? Read the book of Exodus. Read the repetition in the book of Deuteronomy. Everyone had prophecy. Everyone had the experience together. It was a national revelation. Our religion was founded not by one man in the mountain, not by Muhammad in Mecca, not by Paul on the way to Damascus. It was 1.5 million people collectively experiencing. And after that, we heard with our own ears, we had this prophetic experience, Moshe alei lahar, Moses, come up to the mountain. Therefore, the reason why we believe Moses is a prophet, not because he made some sort of prediction. Right? And even the miracles that Moses did, there were all miracles that we just needed. Like Moses, we were hungry, Moses gave us manna from heaven, he tells us, and it came. Right? We were thirsty, Moses hits the rock and there's water, and that's how we would sustain ourselves for 40 years. We're entrapped by the Egyptian army, Moses splits the sea. Those were miracles that were needed, but they're a necessity. They weren't verification miracles. The reason why we believed in Moses, the reason why we know that Moses is a prophet, Moses was verified by all of us individually. We experienced prophecy with him. We heard Moshe alei lahar. Moses disappeared into the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. No one was there with him. He didn't take any food or nourishment with him. He comes back down with tablets. He breaks the tablets. The whole thing goes back again. Comes back a third time. Ends up in Yom Kippur, etc. Right? We experienced his prophecy. We know he's a prophecy. Therefore, Moses is the father of all prophets. Why is that? Because if you and I were there in the year 580, whatever, 580 to 630, and we have Muhammad who says, I don't know how to do Muhammad impersonation. I don't want to get stoned by the Muslims. Yeah, okay. So Muhammad comes to us and says, hey guys, I'm a prophet, and this is what's called Muhammad Rasul Allah, and this is, right, and this is the book of the Quran, these are the instructions. What do we say? Hey, you're a prophet. How do we know that you're not right? How do you know that how do you know you're not pulling our leg? And he probably pulls out a sword and beats us to bloody pulp. That's what would happen. But the legitimate question to ask Muhammad, or anyone, or just say, hey, how do we know that you're right? How do we know that you're not a charlatan? How do you know that you're not pulling your leg? How do you know that you're real? How do we know you're not bogus? And that's a legitimate question that we can ask about every prophet. And that's the question that we're required to ask. We have to be skeptics. And Jewish people were always very good at doing that. Moses is a prophet, but we were there. We all know that he's a prophet. We don't need any other external verification for that. It was an unprecedented experience, an historical event that's documented by millions of people. They were there, they saw with their own eyes, they heard with their own ears. Moses is a verified prophet, and he's the father of all prophets. You know why? You look at the Torah. This past week, we see a prophecy of Jacob. What's the legitimate skeptical question to ask? What's a legitimate skeptical question? How do we know he's a prophet? Abraham, how do we know he's a prophet? Isaac, how do we know he's a prophet? Noah, Adam, these people that are talking to God, how do we know that's true? You were there, we were there, we didn't verify it. It's true because Moses told it it's true. Moses is a verified prophet. Therefore, all the prophets that came before him, we only know that they're prophets because Moses told us. The prophets that came afterwards, they're also kind of sons of Moses in prophecy because Moses gives us the guidelines of how to verify prophets.
Yeah.
Hence, the reason why we believe Jeremiah and Isaiah and Ezekiel and Elijah and Samuel that came afterwards is because Moses said, hey, you guys know I'm a verified prophet? I'm going to give you the Torah. In the Torah, it's going to tell you how to verify prophets. How do we know who's a true prophet and who's a fake prophet? We believe in Isaiah because Moses, who we all know is a true prophet, told us, believe in Isaiah. He's the right person, he's the right qualifications, and he fulfilled all the criteria for becoming a prophet.
Amen.
Amen, yes. If someone tries to...
We have to amen.
Okay.
It's 12:25.
Sorry.
That's why normally I wouldn't keep my phone out, but I needed to watch time.
Okay, so let me just can I wrap up?
Yeah.
Yes. If someone comes and says, hey, I want to contradict the prophecy of Moses, by definition, we can't believe him. Because the only reason why we would believe him is because Moses told us to believe in him. Because Moses is the father of all prophets. He laid down the law. He told us what is a prophet, what does a prophet need to do, how do we verify who's a prophet. If someone says, hey, I'm a prophet and I'm going to disprove Moses, by definition we can't believe him. Right? Moses was a prophet on a much higher level, a verified prophet, and therefore we cannot believe someone whose prophecy is coming to. It's just like someone hits like, hey, Howard, what do you have for breakfast today?
Cereal.
What if we come and we testify that you didn't have cereal? You had, I don't know, omelets.
You'd be a false prophet.
No, the point is you know you had cereal. No matter what we say, you know you had cereal. We know. The same way that you know that what you ate today, you know what you ate today as well, right? We know Moses is a true prophet. No matter what you say, some prophet comes to try to undo that. It doesn't matter. It's what we know. Right. We know we were there, we experienced it. Moses is the father of all prophets. Okay. Thank you all. So that's prophecy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Prophecy of Moses. And I think, we could feel comfortable when we say, hey, our religion is based upon verification. It's not just some sort of dogmatic tradition that our silly grandparents were tricked into believing it. It's real.
We have the proof.
We have evidence.
I'm going to give you a
It's
prophecy today.
there's logical verification
Texans are going to win because at the end of the first quarter they're winning 14-0.
Thank you. I hope
That's
you're
my
right.
prophecy for the day.
And since he is in.
And everyone have a wonderful week, and thank you guys for welcoming me back here.
It was great to be with you.
And maybe we could